Hi everyone, welcome to the Cranial Vault, a neuroanatomy-themed escape room hosted at Swansea University Simulation Centre, which is affectionately known as SUSIM. My name is Chris Summers, and I'm a senior lecturer in clinical anatomy at the medical school, and I've spent much of the last 15 years as a surgical doctor with a specialist interest in academia and medical education. However, like many people in attendance at this conference, I am a gamer at heart. As an educator, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on how and why I can learn mass amounts of information from games. I can recall the whole lore of a world in which I have spent only tens of hours, but if I spent the same time studying that content, I would get nowhere near such proficiency. Anecdotally, I think much of this is down to one word: immersion. This is going to be a bit of a buzzword in the talk, so keep a tally chart of how many times I say it. In games, we immerse ourselves in a world that is a feast to the senses. We are captivated when exploring the sights and sounds in true exploratory fashion. We often embark on the hero's journey, with learning arcs and meeting and learning from bold characters who guide us. This is all tied together with a solid narrative or story, and in essence, good games create the perfect learning environment that is fun to live in and often hard to leave. When you add the little dopamine releases that we get from discovering new things and collecting items, solving puzzles, gaming and therefore learning becomes very addictive. It is this experience I have always sought to emulate in my own teaching sessions. Let me take you on a story of the Cranial Vault then, how I went about trying to immerse my students in its very content. The project initially began around 5 years ago when a student approached me about supervising their dissertation project, unsure on what to do it on. I always remember the look on their face when I floated the idea of building an escape room. With a little persuasion, it wasn't exactly planned on the back of a beer mat, but not far off. We selected the topic of neuroanatomy because it's one of the subjects my students find the most difficult, but it is also a massive topic that requires a huge investment to learn all the nuances of, not dissimilar from the huge campaigns of contemporary RPGs, to be honest. It is also a topic that can often be presented in a dry manner, so we wanted to break this and add a contemporary and interactive feel to it. We set out with the very bones of the topic. We wanted a strong and believable narrative that intertwined anatomy puzzles. We also wished to create a learning curve of sequential discovery that finally culminated in a final puzzle that required all that you had learned prior. For pragmatic reasons, we kept it to 1 hour in length, and we focused in on graduate entry medical students and medical neuroscience students that were studying the content. The most important thing, it had to be fun, and you guessed it, immersive, memorable, and meaningful. Now, all students are competitive, and none more so than medical students, so we encouraged small groups of around 5 or 6 students per escape to compete against the times of other groups, and it worked a charm. Finally, we added what our ethical committee would like us to call extrinsic motivation, essentially a prize that reflected your time and the experience for you to reflect on. And here it is, a humble set of puzzles linked with a good yarn, which I still remain immensely proud of. The students loved it, and I want you to remember this image when I show you what it has become, because I encourage anyone considering creating a game-based learning experience to go ahead and do it. With multiple play testing and commitment of time, over the years you will be surprised what it grows into, and boy did this escape room grow. Since its early inception to now, the escape room has grown enormously. It is now hosted at Swansea University SUSIM, or the Simulation Centre, which has the largest immersive wall installation in Europe. This is a fantastic facility with even better staff that houses many simulation suites for high-fidelity simulation and game-based learning to be conducted. The rooms are extremely flexible, where you can change the sights, sounds and even the smells to emulate a scenario and create true case-based learning with high-fidelity simulation. Here you can see one such example. This is one of the theatre simulation rooms, along with mannequins and props, and even projections on the very walls. As such, our students get to experience theatres before even stepping foot into a hospital, which is a powerful learning experience, and properly encourages them to be prepared when they do so. A real important selling point for me was the interactive walls with hotspots that can be programmed. This has provided the potential for me to mix meat space or physical puzzles with interactive digital ones, and I'm still to maximize its full potential, but super excited to do so. The rooms are also set up with viewing booths, meaning you can observe everything from a one-way glass observation point. Here you can see the students escape without directly affecting the experience and breaking that immersion. You can also control the sights, the lights, the walls, and even in this case, the mannequins to speak to the students, which still freaks me out a little bit, I've got to be honest. There are also cameras throughout the room, allowing you to exist as a fly on the wall, whilst not influencing or breaking the immersion. Here's a quick clip that I took on my phone then of the Cranial Vault in action from the best seat in the house. This has proven extremely powerful. Previously, sitting in on the games has often meant that the inquisitive looks from students when they run into difficulty with content, whereas here, they have to embrace the struggle a little bit. Okay, let's peek inside the Cranial Vault then. In the next few slides, I wish to share some of the anecdotes I've discovered over the last few years, running, developing, and evolving the escape room further. Like any good game, it is important everyone knows the rules. Be explicit in your brief. You will see shortly I have lots of antique props and 3D printed puzzles in the room. It is vital then to encourage students to be courteous with these, as whilst not of great monetarily value, they are essential for future escapees and one-off items. In the excitement, escapees can sometimes resemble a flock of seagulls that will tear into things, so make sure that they're aware to respect the room. In the same vein, I provide students with a space to do some workings out to protect my books from being scribbled on. Similar to the cinema, we want students to switch off all devices so as not to break the immersion of the room. You'll see smartphones and AI don't really fit the theme of what I'm going for, so they're left outside. We ask our students to be cohesive as a team, work together and support each other, and also reiterate that they are not actually locked in. They may leave at any time, but they cannot return. Again, about building that immersion, not breaking them from the narrative. Last couple of rules then. There is nothing worse than the students feeling defeated, hitting a stone roadblock that they cannot pass. So we offer hints, but we do penalise them so as not to allow the students to game the system. Ask me how I know that that's the case. The final point is an important academic one. This is a learning experience. Let the narrative guide you. It is not a run in the room and search for clues, pull everything apart experience like some of the contemporary escape rooms that we see. Instead, it is allowing you to be engaging with the content and working out and earning your escape. A vital point, this last one. Onto the character creation screen then. There's a lot about this experience that is about developing soft skills and the hidden curriculum. Communication, teamwork, these are vital. So we encourage our students to consider this before entering the escape and assign each of them roles or get them to assign themselves the roles. The room is purposefully dark. As you will see, you will need a torch to light the way for certain puzzles. Whilst the scribe documents ideas, clues, the team leader is obviously essential, and a good clear voice to read and narrate the clues, these are just some of the suggestions. There are tangible similarities observing good teams in an escape room to the teams that have existed in trauma teams in a clinical setting, and we highlight this to students at the end. So, strategizing is important, and that's in the hands of the students. The last they see or hear of me at this point, I then leave and hopefully see them when they escape. Over to the story then. We hand our escapees a wax-sealed envelope to set the scene, a visceral experience that feels inclusive to them. Inside is a letter from a slightly aloof professor of anatomy who promises a lifetime of discovery for the scholars who can prove themselves worthy to inherit it. And these letters and correspondence from Prof. Half guide their journey from herein. The eagle-eyed amongst you can already see a clue in this letter. Now when entering the room, the students see a copy of this letter on an old-fashioned typewriter. Pause the video here if you wish to decipher the postscript. Unpaused? Okay, probably gathered this is not a QWERTY keyboard, and the PS is actually a Caesar cipher. We've shifted the letters here. You could spend time deciphering this, or, if you are clever, you can type the letters on the unconventional non-QWERTY keyboard, which would actually spell out exactly what the puzzle is. A couple of ways of solving it. This is the only non-anatomy based puzzle in the whole game, but it's a lovely icebreaker and a nice warm-up for the candidates. And from here, one letter leads to another, and ultimately the goal is to unlock 3 cases in order of increasing difficulty. They're all from Prof. Half's personal collection, of course. Professor Half's doctor's bag, his travel case, and finally his treasure chest. The key to doing so, pun absolutely intended, is finding keys and codes that are hidden in the room or behind anatomy puzzles. We have had to get rather imaginative hiding some of these keys because students accidentally find them. Okay, let's talk about setting the scene then. Tally chart for immersion. All the props that we use in the escape are theme appropriate. Antique, a little dusty, and not out of place in an old-fashioned study. Some of these I've picked up from flea markets and charity shops, others have thankfully been gifted to me. However, one of the biggest game changers was 3D printing. Spot the 3D prints on this table then. Well, all the skulls, the cervical spine in a glass jar, and don't forget the beetle. These can be customized and edited to fit your puzzles or escapes. It is extremely addictive, I've got to be honest. It's a great hobby, and I highly recommend that enormously it can drive down the costs. All the digital models that you see here are free, available online. So here we see the immersive walls in action at SUSIM. I'm fortunate to be able to project wherever I like onto the wall, so a Darwin-esque study it was really. As you've gathered, I was really going for a feast of the senses, and a record player is a fantastic addition to this. Again, theme appropriate. If you're creative enough, you can actually build these into the clues, and it's also a great distractor to build atmosphere and tension, or to even get a few laughs. Now, this is an exciting one, something I haven't tapped into fully yet, but there is the opportunity at SUSIM to add odours into the room. Future iterations then will likely add the smell of old books, or maybe even an old cigar, without all the carcinogens, of course. Olfaction is a potent and powerful memory aid, which I'm sure you're all aware of. On to the puzzles. We decided that even the puzzles needed to be theme and time appropriate, and being medical themed, it was a no-brainer for a neuroanatomy, right? Again, the pun is absolutely intended here. So we build our puzzles to test the content which ties perfectly to our story. Puzzles for anatomy's sake, not for puzzle's sake. Here's a nice easy one then. Again, pause if you wish. A good old-fashioned Snellen chart with a twist. One of our easier but still effective puzzles. An interesting discovery whilst running these sessions that I have found is that students are like moths. They gather around light sources, and you can really use this to your potential. You can use it not just to add mood, but also to use the whole learning environment and get them to move around the space, to use the whole space. Dynamic lighting is a great way of highlighting the next spot in a puzzle without having to enter the room and break that word of the day, immersion. Here's one of my favourite images from one of the escapes then. It shows a gaggle of students around a light source and a brain in a box. It really does show the potency of dark room with limited lighting. Okay, finally then, a question. Is escaping enough? In short, probably not. The first question asked by every student is, were we quicker than the other teams? And the last thing you want at the end of a concrete learning experience is an anticlimax. So ending with some extrinsic motivation in the form of a prize helps. A 3D printed skull is a cost-effective little memento to remember the session by, and it works as a desk ornament, but also, hopefully, will increase the time our students spend studying the skull. A covert way of tricking them into learning more anatomy, I guess. Now, after your escape, there is a body of literature that finds there is no learning without reflection, and I encourage you to scaffold this by taking the time to debrief your students. Here's the model we use at SUSIM, but many exist like it, and the idea is to try and pry out some learning opportunities from the session, some take-homes. Meaningful observations are potent anchors to reflect on, and it's your job as the facilitator to try and pry those out. It is worth having a list of common themes you've seen to hand, and here are some of the ones that I have found and that I use, but adapt them to specific observations for each escape. One of the most common ones is temporal compression, how time seems to stand still when fixated on a task. Students always remark it felt extremely quick when they were in there. It felt like it was 5 minutes when actually they've been an hour. This is a really important insight for future surgeons, as you can imagine, but the environment in which they experience it is a psychologically safe one in this case. It is potent nonetheless. Another key pointer relevant to clinical cohorts is maintaining a clear workspace when conducting procedures or tasks. Remember, these escapes can be like a flock of seagulls. The letters are often thrown everywhere. If you're creative, you can punish this behavior with a puzzle and a time at the end that requires organization. Speaking of chaos and time, be kind to yourself while building your escape. Run in multiple groups in a rapid succession. Give yourself a little rapid reset checklist. It's an absolute lifesaver. Okay, so here is a quick video extract from some filming that was conducted by Immersive, a company that works with SUSIM. Gives you a little peek into the Cranial Vault. Over to past Chris to explain a little bit more.
So this is an anatomy-themed escape room where the puzzles are sequential puzzles that are based around neuroanatomy that test or enhance students' ability to work as a team to escape through the puzzles whilst showing off their anatomy skills. Seeing students physically jump up and down with excitement is not something we usually get with a PowerPoint. We always talk about the teaching environment as being key. Well, you can control everything in here. So the ability to have a clock ticking in the background, the ability to have music playing so that you can build a real immersive environment and atmosphere.
A little insight then without giving away too many of my puzzles. I hope that one day we can welcome you to this, so I don't want to give everything away. It'll likely change by then. Now, much of what I've presented has outlined personal anecdotes. However, there is a growing body of literature to support the underlying pedagogy, hence this conference. Much of this is steeped in experiential learning and social constructivism. Another pause for you, and maybe a magnifying glass will suffice to decipher the word cloud that I've created. And if you attend some of the other sessions, I'm sure lots of this will be covered elsewhere also. And that is it. The Cranial Vault. A last word from me then. If you're considering building a game-based instructional design, please do it. In 20 years of academia, it represents the most fun I've had creating and running a teaching session. You yourself will learn a considerable amount in the process. Thanks a lot for listening. My name is Chris Summers, and I hope to see you at the question and answer session in the future.